In the 1930s, Philip Van der Stern had a dream. A middle-aged man was standing atop a bridge on a snowy Christmas Eve, contemplating suicide. Suddenly, he was visited by his guardian angel and shown that his life was more meaningful than he realized. Stern remembered the dream very clearly when he woke up the next morning. He told the story to his wife, and she responded that it sounded wonderful. Stern knew that he had something special here, and he began to write the outline for his story in 1938. But despite him already being a renowned Civil War historian and author, no publishing company wanted to touch it. Finally, in 1943, Stern decided to send his unpublished story out as a 21-page Christmas card. He titled it The Greatest Gift and mailed out 200 copies to friends and family. One copy of the card eventually found its way into the hands of movie producer David Hempstead at RKO. He loved it and immediately offered Stern $10,000 for the rights. Today, that adds up to just over $150,000. RKO considered Cary Grant for the lead role, but production was delayed several times due to creative differences among the writers. Several screenwriters tried their hand at the story: Dorothy Parker, Dalton Trumbo, Mark Connolly, Clifford Odets, among many others. But the scripts were not satisfying for RKO, and The Greatest Gift was eventually shelved. In 1941, film director Frank Capra had put aside his Hollywood career to join the United States Army as a colonel during World War II. He was born in Italy, but he was proud to fight for the freedom of his adopted country. The Army took advantage of his filmmaking background, making him director of several documentaries for the government, known today as the Why We Fight series. The first video, Prelude to War, won Best Documentary at the 1942 Academy Awards. By 1945, Capra was ready to return to Hollywood and begin making movies again. He founded his own production company titled Liberty Films, along with producer Samuel J. Briskin. Fellow filmmakers William Wyler and George Stevens came on board as business partners a few months later. Liberty Films ended up signing a contract with RKO to make 9 films over the next 10 years. 3 films directed by each of the 3 directors. During a meeting with RKO studio chief Charles Coroner suggested that Capra take a look at a script titled The Greatest Gift. Capra loved it, and RKO was more than happy to sell it to him for the $10,000 they originally paid. It said that they even threw in 3 drafted scripts for free. Capra then hired writers Albert Hackett and Francis Goodrich, a husband and wife duo, to take the best parts of the existing scripts and merge them into one. As for the lead, Grant was a good actor, but Capra had someone else in mind who he believed was just the man for the role: James Stewart. Capra and Stewart were no strangers to each other. They had worked together twice before: You Can't Take It With You in 1938 and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington in 1939. Capra met with Stewart and pitched him the idea. According to Stewart, Capra began to lose confidence in the proposal as he went along, like he was just realizing at that very moment how stupid the whole idea of the movie sounded. But by the end of the pitch, Stewart only had one question for Capra: when do we start? It may not have been the best pitch meeting ever, but Stewart, like Capra, was desperate to find work again after the war, and he also had complete faith in Capra's vision. Stewart did not, however, have complete faith in himself. He had joined the Air Force during World War II and came home a decorated war hero. After years of not being in front of the camera, Stewart's confidence had waned, and he began to wonder if he was still capable of handing in a good performance. Ironically, Stewart was consoled by fellow actor Lionel Barrymore, who was cast in the film as the despicable Mr. Potter. Barrymore gave Stewart the confidence boost that he needed to go ahead with the picture. By the time production on the film began, Frank Capra had changed the title of the film to It's a Wonderful Life, which premiered on December 20th, 1946. The story centers on George Bailey, a young man in the small town of Bedford Falls, whose life ambition has always been to escape his dead-end birthplace and travel the world. But life, as usual, has other plans and keeps getting in the way. Over the years, George begins to contemplate his life and wishes that he had never been born. But then, an angel named Clarence, played by Henry Travers, comes down from heaven to show George how special his life really is. What can I say about this movie that hasn't been said already? If you haven't seen the movie, first of all, for shame, but the title of the movie alone pretty much speaks for itself. We all know what it's like to be George Bailey, someone who doubts his own value, someone who has this life goal only to have it crushed by life's other plans. His struggles are really sympathetic. One character that I think is finally starting to get the credit she deserves is George's wife, Mary. Capra had originally considered Jean Arthur for the role after she had worked with both him and Stewart in You Can't Take It With You and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. But at the time, Miss Arthur had other commitments, so she was forced to turn Capra down. The decision was finally made to cast a fresh face for the role instead, and the part eventually went to a young Donna Reed. No disrespect to Miss Arthur, but personally, I think casting Miss Reed was the better choice. Miss Arthur could project the right type of strength and spirit to play Mary Bailey, but personally, I don't think her nasally New York accent would have been a good fit. What do you guys think?
An honorary stooge like me against the tailors and pains and machines and lies.
Your friend Mr. Lincoln had his tailors and pains. So did every other man who ever tried to lift his thought up off the ground. Odds against him didn't stop those men. They were fools that way. All the good that ever came into this world came from fools with faith like that. You know that, Jeff.
Donna Reed's portrayal, I think, was the right fit for a small-town woman like Mary. Mary is the whole reason why George has his wonderful life to begin with. George may have still had the love of the townspeople, but in addition, Mary was always there to support him when he was down, gave him a beautiful home, a family, and at times she feels like the true backbone that keeps George going. George has so much to live for, and Mary is one of the main reasons for that, if not the biggest. Henry Travers is charming as Clarence too. Though I do think his childish nature is a bit overplayed, he's still a welcoming sight. Once in a while, he gets a chuckle too.
You don't have to make all that fuss about it.
That's enough talking about the angels in George's life. How about the devil? On the American Film Institute's list of the top 50 greatest villains in American cinema, Henry F. Potter is placed at number 6. I do have to commend Lionel Barrymore for playing such a terrible character. Throughout the entire movie, he's basically trying to take control of the whole town, and George Bailey is the only one with the ability to stand in his way, which leads Potter to try and make George's life as miserable as he can. If there is one problem most people seem to have with the movie, it would probably be the fact that Potter never gets his just desserts by the end of the film. He steals the $8,000 that was supposed to be deposited into the bank, and then turns the blame onto George, making it sound like a possible criminal offense for misplacing so much money. By the end of the movie, the money is never recovered, and we don't see Potter charged with any crime, and we don't see his reaction when he finds out that his plan to ruin George failed yet again. That's a fair argument, but I'm personally okay with it ending the way it did. Potter was going to find out what happened eventually, and I've always believed that the imagination can be more satisfactory than anything that filmmakers can put on screen. Potter sitting at his desk, giddily making plans to take over the businesses of the town, picturing George Bailey, his longtime nemesis, behind bars. Suddenly, one of his men comes in and tells him that the whole town has come together to donate the $8,000 that was quote-unquote misplaced, thus not giving them any excuse to arrest George Bailey. I can just picture Potter taking a moment to let this sink in and finally slamming his fist on the table, unleashing a long line of profanities that they couldn't show on screen back then, finally suffering a well-deserved heart attack, falling out of his wheelchair. Hey, I can dream, can't I? In fact, the very creation of Mr. Potter received backlash too. When the movie first came out, an FBI memo directly accused the character as an obvious attempt to discredit bankers, which in their eyes was considered an act of communism. If I were to nitpick, I would have liked it if there was a small scene where George would apologize to Mrs. Welch. You know, Zuzu's teacher whom he ridicules for his daughter's illness. I'm only saying this because even today, school teachers don't get nearly the respect they deserve. I'm not saying every teacher is a saint, but seeing the kind of stuff that they have to put up with makes me realize that even the great teachers aren't given nearly enough credit and appreciation. I'm not going to justify what Mrs. Welch's husband did in the bar scene, but it would have been nice if George had met her on the street or something and just apologized for his behavior. I think it would have set a good example for viewers. Sure, it's one thing to apologize to your family when you act foolish, but it takes a different kind of strength and nobility to apologize to a complete stranger, someone you will most likely never see again. That's just me scraping the bottom of the barrel for a nitpick. It doesn't ruin the movie in any way. It's just something I personally would have liked to see. Capra, Stewart, and Reed have all gone on record stating that It's a Wonderful Life was their favorite film to work on. They were certain it would be a timeless classic right from the start. The public, however, disagreed. Though it was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, It's a Wonderful Life was a flop at the box office and received mixed reviews from critics. In fact, it's said that director Capra was over $500,000 in the hole after the movie's release, sending him into a panic as he tried to dig himself out as quickly as he could with his next film, State of the Union. But by 1951, Liberty Films was forced to close up shop and was purchased by Paramount. For 2 decades, It's a Wonderful Life lay dormant. By the 1970s, its current owner, Republic Pictures, didn't have any faith in it, so they never bothered renewing the rights when the time came. By 1974, the movie had crossed into public domain, and the TV stations were grateful for the now free content. Its constant broadcast on multiple stations helped grow its audience. Suddenly, new viewers turned the film into one of the best holiday movies ever made. Capra himself was taken aback by this counter-reaction. I'm like a parent whose kid grows up to be president. I'm proud, but it's the kid that did all the work. Jimmy Stewart pretty much felt the same. They won't let it die any more than the Angel Clarence would let George Bailey die. Aside from his $10,000 for the movie rights, Philip Van Doren Stern never made a profit from the film. But he later said in a 1977 interview with the Herald Tribune that he never regretted it. Stern did, however, receive a couple of letters of appreciation. One was from Jimmy Stewart, saying that it was an inspiration for everyone connected to the picture to work on it, because everyone seemed to feel that the story was so good and right. The second letter was from director Frank Capra, saying to Stern, "How grateful I am that you wrote The Greatest Gift." It's a Wonderful Life has now become a staple tradition of the holiday season. The Christmas setting may not be for everyone, but there is no doubt that the struggles that the characters face are relatable to our everyday lives. I believe It's a Wonderful Life should be one of the required movies that everybody needs to see before they die. It's one of those true, timeless classics that the entire family can enjoy every year. I'm going to give It's a Wonderful Life 5 stars. Well, guys, I know this year hasn't been the easiest, but I hope you made it through the best you could. Have a happy new year, and whichever holiday you celebrate, whether it be Christmas, Hanukkah, or Kwanzaa, I wish you all the best this holiday season. See you next year.